We have a couple of really interesting updates coming out by some NFL insiders that I kind of want to get into. One involving the quarterback position, and then I also want to talk towards the end of this video about some of the Raiders free agents and why the Raiders have not made it official with some of these guys, which also means the Raiders can actually end up losing some of these guys. The free agency period begins in 3 days from now, so if it hasn't happened yet, there's a good chance it won't happen as we kind of go forward. But let's get right into this. So Deanna Rossini, who's a very good NFL insider, put it out there saying that the Las Vegas Raiders are exploring veteran quarterback options on the free agent and trade market per sources. That includes the possibility of trading for a current starting quarterback. To me, very solid insider Deanna Rossini is. And the fact that she's saying the Raiders are exploring the veteran quarterback options on the free agent and trade market, to me, that tells me that the Raiders are realistically looking to go forward with a different quarterback. In yesterday's video, we talked about Aiden O'Connell working with Tom Brady, watching tape and those type of things. And I read your guys' feedback. A lot of you guys were like, hey, let's just go into the season with Aiden O'Connell. It just makes sense. His upside's still through the roof, right? We don't really know what this guy is. Sometimes it takes quarterbacks a little bit longer to develop. And I don't disagree with that, right? That definitely makes sense. But if Deanna Rossini is putting it out there, this to me tells me some NFL agent out there, some team, some general manager that Deanna Rossini knows is giving her this inside information, right? And she's a general good source, right? She's not the type of person to make things up. We know there's a lot of people that make things up. She's definitely not one of those people. And, there's a lot of options as well. We've been hearing a lot about Kirk Cousins. Although Kirk Cousins is not a starting quarterback, at least anymore, we heard a lot about Kirk Cousins being an option for the Raiders. I remember Kirk Cousins had a season-ending injury just a year before last year. And as he had that season-ending injury, last year he really wasn't healthy. So this year he'd obviously be a lot healthier. And I think for the Raiders, it's definitely an interesting option. I'm not a huge fan of Kirk Cousins. I won't lie to you guys. I'm really not a huge fan of a lot of the quarterbacks that are kind of available right now, truth be told. Sam Darnold's probably the only quarterback that I actually like, that I'd be okay with because of his upside, right? We don't really know what that actually is. But guys like, Kirk Cousins, even Geno Smith, I think Geno Smith is the other option that could make sense for the Raiders. The Seattle Seahawks have started to, DK Metcalf's requested a trade. They released Tyler Lockett, and they released multiple defensive linemen just 2-3 days back. Guys like Jermont Jones, who signed like a $15 million contract when he left the Broncos for the Seahawks like 3 years back. They released other defensive linemen, starting caliber guys, and to me it looks like the Seahawks might actually try to start this rebuild based off of what they've kind of done over the past couple of days. Which also means there's a chance that Geno Smith ends up getting traded. I'll be the first to tell you guys, I think the Seattle Seahawks, they kind of went all in with the years that Pete Carroll was there, his final few years, and it really didn't work out. Geno Smith was an okay quarterback, but I don't think he's good enough to win that, that playoff game or that Super Bowl game. I don't think he's good enough, which is a reason, which is another reason why I think for the Raiders, it doesn't make sense to go in after a guy like Geno Smith. I wouldn't hate bringing in Geno Smith, but I feel like the upside is limited as opposed to someone like Sam Darnold, where there's more upside, right? And even Sam Darnold, like, I'm not 100% sold on him, right? He's an average quarterback right now. But Sam Darnold, you do have upside, right? He's 27 years old. There's a lot of potential there with a guy like Sam Darnold. And then, of course, there's still other free agent options. But again, the fact that Deanna Rossini is putting it out there that the Raiders are exploring this option at least tells me this is what the Raiders kind of think of their future, right? The Raiders obviously feel like we're not going to roll forward with Aiden O'Connell. We're not going to roll forward with one of these younger guys, even via the draft. A lot of people have talked about the draft. A lot of people have said that, Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, even Cam Ward might be the quarterback that the Raiders ultimately pick. But it does look like, every day as time kind of goes by, the Raiders are interested more so in that veteran market. And we'll see what actually ends up happening, right? Nothing's ever guaranteed. It's lying season, truth be told. But the fact that we are getting to that point where there's a couple days left, right? Like Sam Darnold was not franchise tagged, and he has 3 days before he officially becomes that free agent, and he's free to talk to whoever he ultimately wants, right? There's another interesting update that came out. This came out by Mike Garafolo, who's a very solid NFL insider. I think works for NFL Network. He said there's 3 teams that are interested in DK Metcalf. And the Raiders apparently were one of the teams that had reached out and were actually very aggressive about potentially bringing in DK Metcalf. Check out what he had to say, and then we'll talk about this on the other side.
What do you have the name of teams that would be interested in DK? Specific teams that are interested in him?
Yeah, there's no question Pete Carroll's interested, no doubt. And I heard that at the combine. that he had let it be known that he would be interested if he was available. So the Raiders are 1,000,000% in the running here. That's one of them. You've got history in Carolina with both the general manager and the head coach. So would not surprise me at all. I know people are talking about the Packers as well. I'm sure that there's interest there as well. So those are the three teams just off the top of my head and just off the basically what I've heard now in the last couple of days that I would put in the mix.
So there you guys have it, right? Mike Garafolo is putting it out there that the Las Vegas Raiders, the Carolina Panthers, and the Green Bay Packers may be three teams that DK Metcalf could potentially be traded to. But the interesting thing that he said within that segment is that Pete Carroll had made it clear at the Combine, right? Pete Carroll had made it known that he's 100% invested in DK Metcalf. Pete Carroll has actually shown interest. As opposed to the Carolina Panthers and the Green Bay Packers, Mike Garafolo didn't actually say anything about those two teams showing interest, right? He just kind of connected those two teams to DK Metcalf. Of course, the Panthers have some former Seahawks executives. But with the Raiders specifically, Mike Garafolo is saying that there's actually the potential that the Raiders actually make it happen because of the fact that Pete Carroll has made it clear that he wants DK Metcalf. Now, we've already spoken about Metcalf. We understand that when you bring in a guy like DK Metcalf, right, the Raiders are missing a true number one wide receiver, right? They're missing a guy that could, he could play the X position, but then you can also put him in the slot if Brock Bowers lines up that way, right? You get into a trips formation. Brock Bowers can be that X in a trips. DK Metcalf can go into motion, right? Because he's fast, he's quick, he's explosive. But you get a true number one threat opposite of Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker. To me, DK Metcalf just makes so much sense. And again, we've already spoken about this multiple times for the past couple of days. But I think for the Raiders, you have to realistically consider DK Metcalf. You have to consider actually bringing this guy in and making it work. And of course, I know Pete Carroll is interested in DK. Now, the one thing we do have to realize as well is DK is not going to be cheap. He's going to want a new contract. He only has 1 year left on his current contract. He's not going to be cheap, right? So I would think that if you're going to bring him in, I don't think it's going to cost a whole lot in terms of the draft compensation. I think DK Metcalf would go for like a third, fourth round pick. Again, I don't think it's anything crazy given the fact that he wants 25 to 35 million, right? Somewhere in between that range. And of course, that would be an extension, right? So this next year, it could be a little bit cheaper for the Raiders, which could also explain why the Raiders, kind of up Maxx Crosby's contract for these 2 years. And then maybe they kind of backload that contract a little bit if they bring in a guy like DK. It's an interesting thought, however you kind of look at it, right? Because another thing we have to realize is the Raiders have 27 pending free agents. And with that, the Raiders have already went out and signed 8 guys, essentially, right? 7 guys that were already previously with the Raiders. And then, of course, Alex Kappa, who's released by the Cincinnati Bengals. The Raiders went out and signed him as well, right? So the Raiders have already kind of started making some of these decisions. They've already started making some of these moves and essentially signing people. But that also leaves a bunch of other guys that are kind of unsigned at this point. And it makes you think, we're 3 days away from the legal tampering period to begin, right? And what that means is in 3 days from now, you can start to officially agree with players on contracts. It won't be processed until March 12th, but as of March 10th, and truth be told, within the first hour, we're going to get like 6 guys signed, right? And I'm not saying the Raiders specifically. I'm saying we're going to get like 6 players officially agreed to with certain teams. If Trayvon Merrick leaves the Las Vegas Raiders on March 10th specifically, he'll be in the Dallas Cowboys building on March 10th, right? He'll be signing that contract on that day, or at least he'd be agreeing to it on that day. Maybe he'll sign officially on the 12th. But on March 10th, the day of the legal tampering period, as it begins, I think it's like 12 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. As soon as that time begins, we're going to start to hear, hey, this guy's signing with this team and this guy's signing with this team. But it is interesting nonetheless that the Raiders haven't made it a priority to bring back some of these different guys. And it almost makes me feel like the Raiders might look at guys like Malcolm Koonce and Trayvon Merrick and say, hey, go test the market. If you can get 18, 19, $20 million, go ahead and sign with this other team. We're not paying you that. And I almost feel like for the Raiders, that's the wrong way to approach this. Trayvon Merrick is a guy that we drafted. And, I don't think Trayvon Merrick is going to get $20 million. I think Trayvon Merrick is probably closer to like $15 million. I think for the Raiders, you have to consider bringing Merrick back. Now, I understand safety is kind of it's kind of a system position, right? It's kind of similar to corners, right? Defensive backs, generally speaking, are going to be a lot better depending on the coach. Maybe the Raiders replace Trayvon Merrick with a rookie or a free agent or whatever it is. But the Raiders have to realistically bring some of these guys back, like even Malcolm Koonce. If the Raiders lose Malcolm Koonce, I think that's a huge loss for the Las Vegas Raiders. Not saying that, we couldn't sign Koonce or Merrick later on, like 2 or 3 weeks from now, after they kind of go to other teams and visit and get those contract offers. Not that the Raiders couldn't sign them in the future, but the chances of them actually signing do drop, right? If they don't make that decision before the actual, period begins, to me, means that the Raiders might not actually sign some of these guys. We always have to remember too, right? Guys like Malcolm Koonce, he plays a position that's very, very important. So some other team might be willing to outbid the Raiders for a guy like Malcolm Koonce. So we'll see what actually ends up happening. I do find it interesting nonetheless. And then finally, I want to just talk about this report. I should state that I don't know if this is 100% fact, right? That Hondo Carpenter actually said this on his podcast. But according to this guy right here, he said that on Hondo's podcast, Hondo Carpenter reported one team would have given up 3 first-round picks for Maxx Crosby. If that's true, the Raiders are going to regret this. This is the 3rd consecutive GM that doesn't understand sell high, buy low. Again, I don't know if this is true, but I'm going to just make the assumption this is true. I don't see someone just kind of making something up for no reason. But I do want to talk about this, right? If Hondo Carpenter, what he's saying, if this is a fact, that one team offered 3 first-round picks for Maxx Crosby, if this is a 100% fact, is it a mistake for the Las Vegas Raiders not to sell Maxx Crosby for 3 first-round picks? This is a tweet that I saw someone else post as well, and it got a lot of traction. Half the guys are saying, hey, if a team really offered 3 first-round picks, why would you not take that for Maxx? Bring back Malcolm, pay a guy like Trey Hendrickson, and take those 3 first-round picks and actually get better as a team. Sometimes I think people overlook the fact that, guys like Maxx Crosby aren't just good, productive football players. They're leaders, right? They're guys that matter in the building. When Maxx Crosby has a birthday party, he's a leader. You're going to get so many guys that are going to show up for that birthday party. When Maxx Crosby, has something going on, people are going to show up for Maxx, right? Because he's a leader in the building. He helps develop guys. We've kind of seen guys like Clavon Chason, Adam Butler, and others, right, have kind of taken off with a guy like Maxx, helping these guys. I remember when I did my interview with Maxx Crosby years back, I remember he was telling me that he had a hard timeline because he was going to attend a pass rush summit, right? It was an online pass rush summit that he was going to do. He said he does it every single week. He said Clavon Chason was one of the guys that he had mentioned at that time to me that, hey, he's part of that as well, right? And it's one of those things where what Maxx Crosby brings to the Raiders is worth so much more, right, than just the actual player on the football field. And also don't overlook the fact that some guys don't love the game of football. Some guys don't do everything to be great. Maxx Crosby does, right? Maxx Crosby is truly a unique football player in that instance. Now, I'm going to also just give you guys my opinion. I'm not going to say Hondo Carpenter's a liar, but 3 first-round picks for Maxx Crosby, I feel like that's way too much, right, for a team to say we will give that up for Maxx Crosby, right? Especially given the fact that he's going to turn 29 years old soon. And I'm not saying Maxx Crosby's not worth 3 first-round picks, right? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, in the NFL, it doesn't work where, guy's 32 years old and the team just gives up 3 first-round picks. Right? Usually when a team gives up multiple first-round picks, it's because that guy is 23, 24 years old. He just got done with his rookie contract, and he hasn't gotten that first big contract. Right? So this guy has like 8-9 years left in his NFL career, and he plays in an important position. Obviously, Maxx Crosby plays defensive end, which is a very important position. But 3 first-round picks for Maxx, I think that'd be way too much, unless it's a team like the Philadelphia Eagles or the Kansas City Chiefs who are going to pick in the bottom of the draft, right? But even then, I find that hard to believe. Again, I'm not saying Maxx Crosby wouldn't be worth that if he was on his rookie contract. After year 5's coming up, he's 24, 25. I'm not saying he wouldn't be worth that at that point. I'm just saying today, I'm not sure if this is true. But it is an interesting report nonetheless. Again, I don't agree with what this guy's saying specifically, where he's saying that the Raiders are going to regret this by not selling him high. There's a real chance, and I hope people, really, really, really think about this. There's a real chance that Maxx Crosby does request a trade in 2 years from now, right? The way his contract is designed, you don't design your contract that way unless you realistically think that, hey, I want to have an out for myself, but more than just having an out, right? It's not just the fact that he has an out. It's the fact that that contract is very, very, very team friendly for any team that makes that trade. Think about it. Having Maxx Crosby for 3 years at $28 million is a huge deal. In 3 years from now, right, or in 2 years from now specifically, when that third year is coming around, Nick Bosa is going to be signing for $46 million. Like, that's going to be the defensive end market in 3 years from now. It might not be exactly 46, maybe it's 42 million, but the market for those guys is going to be way different in a couple of years than it is today, right? So to me, the way his contract is designed, the Raiders better win now, man. And I do think the veteran quarterback route makes the most sense. Not feeling good today. I don't know if you guys have noticed or not. Not feeling good at all. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And if you did, consider subscribing. We will be covering the Raiders as we kind of go forward. Thumbs up, subscribe. I hope you guys all have a great, productive weekend. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy your family. And I'll see you guys next time with another video.